What's the worst Call of Duty multiplayer of all time? Now, how you answer this depends entirely on when you started playing Call of Duty. For some, it was Black Ops 2. Many, World War II. The sane, Ghosts. But in the history of Call of Duty, it's hard to argue which game is more divisive within the community than Modern Warfare 2019. Aside from Ghosts maybe, but seriously, f that game. To some, it's a return to basics, while also showing innovative design for the first time in many years. For others, it's a bastardized concept, promoting a slower game pace, rewarding those who rarely move and making it extremely easy for the lesser skilled, while really rewarding those better. In this video, I want to talk about the specific reasons as to why there are such differing opinions over the game, and why many players regard it as the worst Call of Duty of all time. So, let's kick it off. So let's head back to the start. I mean, before the game even launched. Early gameplay and advertisements gave the impression that Call of Duty was heading in a more gritty and hardcore direction. Think Rainbow Six Siege with intense customization, a focus on tactical gameplay with functioning doors, recon drones, mounting on surfaces, and new gear that allowed for gathering more information on the enemy team, instead of running full bore in the chaos and shooting at everything that showed a pulse. And yes, all of these made it into the final product we've since played very intensely and are extremely familiar with now. Now, this change does indeed seem quite dramatic compared to the COD games we have come to know. Slow and tactical hasn't really been Call of Duty's thing before. It has always leaned on the more arcade side of gameplay. Call of Duty has always been a run and gun game, right? Pick a lane and go shoot anything that moves. Well, yes, but also contrary to what many players think, this mentality is only really developed in the last decade, mostly influenced by the Black Ops franchise, a franchise that prides itself on small, free-lane maps and non-stop movement. So is Modern Warfare really not a traditional COD game, or is it just Black Ops fans not getting an endless meat grinder experience like they're used to? I should also clarify before I go on, I really enjoyed my time with Modern Warfare 19. If anything, it's the first COD game since Modern Warfare 3 back in 2011 that I got quite addicted to playing. But that doesn't mean I don't have issues with the game, and that there isn't glaring design flaws that prevent it from being a great game. In the last decade, and with the aforementioned Black Ops series, Call of Duty has prided itself on small, often free-lane maps to funnel players into the action faster and keep the pace from slowing down. And Modern Warfare 19 is still somewhat guilty of this with maps like Shoot House, Arklov Peak, Cheshire Park, Atlas Superstore, just to name a few. But when we look back at fan favorites like High Rise, Terminal, Favela, Raid, Carrier, Estate, and so many more, the one thing that sticks out is that even if they use free lanes, many of them are open in design with multiple pathing routes, elevation with high ground location snipers will prioritize, and tight corner shotgun campers will hide behind. Seems a little familiar, right? For now though, let's focus on the basic gameplay changes and new features. Tactical Sprint is a completely new feature in Modern Warfare. I'm now going to refer to this game as just that, just to keep it short and my tongue from tearing itself out. While sprinting, you can activate the sprint key again and gain an extra burst of movement speed. The downside being it takes longer for your gun to be ready to fire. Now, the basic idea of Tactical Sprint isn't inherently bad. It allows you to cross open areas much faster and use movement to your advantage, reposition and to flank enemies. But the flaw lies with the maps not being designed around this feature, similar to how wall running in Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare felt a bit out of place, because the maps are too small to accommodate such a feature. This leaves already small maps feeling significantly smaller. Then we tie in the oversight with the sliding ability. While sprinting, you're able to activate the crouch button to perform a slide, useful for getting in the cover or appearing around a corner at a moment's notice for a surprise attack on an enemy. Seems good, right? Well, if you combine this with Tactical Sprint and some finger gymnastics, you can essentially never run out of Tactical Sprint, and with the Auto Tac Sprint option, you no longer have to even toggle the ability. The game does it for you, making slide cancelling even easier. Again, this allows players to traverse the map much faster than previous Call of Duty titles, and even the most largest of maps begin to feel quite small. While now an integral component of the game and a function that separates the good from the best, slide cancelling, as it is known, has created a much faster style of gameplay that feels more at home in a futuristic game like, say, Titanfall, than it does in a game titled Modern Warfare. While Tac Sprint is supposed to have the drawback of taking longer for your gun to be ready to fire, there are numerous attachments that can completely negate this disadvantage and even create incredibly accurate hipfire builds, which results in no benefit from walking slower compared to sprinting around like you're trying to maintain dominoes within 30 minutes or your money back pizza deal. Now, from the two gameplay changes I've listed, neither of them seem like they would inherently break the game, right? They've just made it much faster, more Black Ops. Well, this is where the slower tactical elements come into play. The first is the mounting ability. Basically, on most surfaces you can attach yourself at the cost of movement to gain a 50% recoil reduction. It also lowers your visible profile, in some cases making you extremely hard to hit, which for game modes like Hardcore provide a huge advantage. The next is the time to kill. When you kit your guns with the best attachments for damage, you die fast, and I mean very fast. Now this isn't new. Back in Modern Warfare 2, you had the stopping power perk, which increased damage, making most if not all assault rifles kill in 3 to 4 bullets, and a game that already had a rather fast time to kill. However, SMGs in particular became far less effective at range due to having much higher horizontal recoil. But this was also a time before things like trophy systems existed, or that Cold-Blooded, the equivalent of the Ghost perk, shared the exact same slot. Meaning yes, a player could use that ability and camp a corner, but they risked their position being shown on the UAV. But back to the time to kill issue. With such a fast and frantic gameplay almost encouraged by non-stop sprinting and sliding, and the mounting mechanic with incredibly low recoil yet fast time to kill, this causes several things. First is kill lanes, which are exceptionally difficult to fight against, especially when multiple members of a team mount up on a small laned map, leading to very little opportunities for flanking or even moving about the map in general. The next is good players with fast reflexes will absolutely decimate. Now is this me complaining? Well, considering I'm one of those players, no, not necessarily. But when things like server latency, packet burst, and server desync are rather prolific throughout the game while playing online, it becomes immensely frustrating to die to someone you had no chance of fighting because the server favored them. The last part is a handful of guns can be built with an instantaneous aim down sight speed, or even stupidly accurate hipfire builds, which again results in a much faster time to kill with less time to react, especially since it isn't penalized by movement. Again, this isn't something new to Call of Duty. How fan favorites like Black Ops 2 and Modern Warfare 2 feature both of these attachments or perks, but they didn't have the movement speed of Modern Warfare, so a player could G-fuel their way through an entire enemy team before the first player blinks. The short answer is that a quicker time to kill, especially with gun builds that feature no difficult to control recoil and fast aim down sight speeds, reduces the amount of time to react when you enter another player's sights. A game like Arma prides itself on incredibly realistic and authentic gunplay, where a single bullet can kill you, but it comes at the cost of incredibly reduced movement, penalties for aggressive gameplay, and exceptionally high recoil, rewarding small bursts or single shots rather than fully auto fire. It's a deliberately slow-paced and tactical shooter that rewards those who are patient and methodical, allowing little to no room for error. If you try to bunny hop around or fire full auto at players even 20 meters away, chances are you'll carve their outline into the wall rather than kill them. Modern Warfare, on the other hand, fast movement and arcade fun has been a core component of Call of Duty for many years. A more casual game, if you will, where a person can pick up a controller and gather kills rather easy. But with that fast movement and low recoil gunplay, there becomes an issue when a fast time to kill is involved. When recoil is no longer a factor and high damage is prevalent, then the notion of beaming players across the map is very easy. And that's where the issue develops. Modern Warfare is trying to marry the gameplay of two very different style of games together. The fast, frantic, and arcadey gameplay of Call of Duty, and the slow, tactical paced gameplay more akin to a Rainbow Six title, but still with the hallmarks of Call of Duty gunplay. This is where the disconnect starts, and where player frustration starts to set in. Why play fast and aggressive if there's a higher chance of being punished for it compared to sitting aiming down a hallway? Ah, but bad thing, you might say. What about running around a different route and shooting them in the head? Well, my friend, as I briefly touched on it before, let me explain. For the most part, the multiplayer maps feature different locales from one another. Rarely do two maps feel like they belong in the exact same location, or that they repeat scenery. From a visual standpoint, this is fantastic, as it allows us as a player to distinguish one map from another easily, and scenery doesn't feel tiring to look at. One glimpse, and we recognize whether we enjoy or dislike a particular map, and it keeps us from confusing them with others of a similar style. But, big but, Kardashian-sized but, the maps often don't have any type of flow, and while you can climb on top of many objects, there's still many small walls or questionable geometry placements that cut off routes and force what could be a rather open map into a simple free-lane mess with strong choke points. Or sometimes it's the complete opposite, and a map is so ridiculously large that battles are few and far between because there's too many different buildings and angles to hold. Arklov Peak is a fantastic example of both of these issues. For a 6v6, it's definitely too big, with so much wasted space on the far sides of the map that no one except a player scared of fighting is even going to bother walking to. But when it comes to 10v10, well, it starts to become a bit of a mess with moving around. Here's the map from above. Let's use some examples. On the left side is red team spawn, right is blue team. Game starts and the teams go out hunting for each other. As complex as this looks from overhead, there's still only 3 lanes to move down with several side tracks. Blue team have 3 players take up these 3 positions, all mount up. Now look at the area each of them cover. Can you see where the problem lies? Yes, all 3 players have each lane covered and each of them cover the routes that flank into the others. It is possible for red team to fight back and even take these positions, but the fight becomes extremely difficult as they have to expose themselves into full line of sight against enemies that, due to the likes of the mounting mechanic, become much harder to hit. And if we were to flip it around so red team is camped up in 3 positions and blue team have to push, yep, exact same issue as before. How do you solve this though? While it's not entirely caused by the map, it is a side effect of the new mechanics and fast time to kill. So how do you solve this? Well, what if we took this area on the bottom side and completely removed it? And then we make this hallway here accessible to the other side, throw some added pieces of cover in the trench so you can actually push through it, and then on the top side remove the small fence alongside the stairs, make this area a small walkthrough, and maybe the same over here if you're feeling generous. Wouldn't this feel much better and prevent choke points more often? A world of opportunities opens up, and suddenly it becomes much more difficult for a team to hold 3 lanes on this map. And it's not just Arklov Peak, an overwhelming majority of Modern Warfare maps have this issue. Superstore, Euphoric's Bridge, Sodal Harbour, St. Petrograd, Grozny Raid, all showcase many of the same issues of either small thin lanes with barely any wiggle room, or too large and expansive for the player count. Hell, even the smaller version of Arnia Palace, Arnia Incursion, still incorporates the pool building and the cargo containers, leading to excessive playable area. I'm sure at this point many of the level designers are creatively bankrupt and feeling exhausted trying to design maps for Call of Duty altogether, which results in even more generic and filler maps, never given them much thought into how they play, and I'm going to be honest, I can't entirely fault them for it, but unfortunately I feel it's integral to point this out as to why Modern Warfare feels bad to certain players. One of the biggest changes that players may have noticed with Modern Warfare is a change to the traditional minimap. Originally during the alpha and the beta, the minimap had been removed. Instead it was only able to be viewed while personal radar, UAV or advanced UAV was active. Rather than have a radar on screen at all times showing dots from players firing unsuppressed guns, Infinity Ward incorporated the compass in the top middle of the screen, with dots varying in size and frequency depending on distance, weapon and whether they were firing full auto or not. This drew a lot of criticism from the community, who I can't fully fault because it's been a part of the game since COD 4. It has since been implemented into the game, however it still doesn't show enemy locations while firing unsuppressed guns, that's still left to the compass. If this had been reverted to the original concept we had known from past COD games, excluding that horrific version we saw in Black Ops 4, this probably would have alleviated many players' issues with not understanding the locations of players. So this is actually where I have very little criticism and more praise than anything else. Gun customization in Modern Warfare is nothing less than f***ing sweet. Never has a Call of Duty game seen this level of customization for weapons. Period. Take that M4A1 for example. Now you could be stock standard and put on a larger magazine, red dot sight and foregrip for recoil control, head off and be a good little frontline soldier. Or you could take it to the next level and put on a suppressor, longer barrel, sniper scope and change the ammunition for larger rounds, and suddenly you have a DMR instead of an assault rifle. Even Battlefield hasn't featured this level of customization before. It's a huge point in COD's favour, and I think I speak for everyone when I say it's a game-changing feature and very much welcomed. My only real criticism is that the balancing for some of the attachments is a little all over the place. Some, like the tactical foregrip for example, have no effect in the game even to this day, and things like longer barrels don't affect the aim down sight speed or movement speed enough to prevent them from being used for close quarters. Some grips also compensate for recoil maybe just a tad too hard. Maybe only picking 3 or 4 attachments instead of 5 might have made this balancing act slightly better. So all in all, Gunsmith, yay. Good job Infinity Ward. It's just a shame Treyarch and Sledgehammer tried to reinvent rather than improve the system you guys created. Another interesting innovation for the Call of Duty franchise. At first, I thought this idea was a bit out of place. I mean, having a perk like Dead Silence or Stopping Power on a cooldown seemed both right and wrong, especially since you could activate either and then immediately die, but it also prevents them from being so prevalent in the gameplay. On the other hand, it provided items like munitions boxes for restocking ammo and throwables, recon drones for scanning player locations, trophy systems to protect against projectiles, and tactical insurgents to respawn from a designated location. Personally, I think this change was quite good. It allowed for variations in gameplay and to not regulate something lesser, like a recon drone for example, to a tactical item or kill streak. This is a much more minor complaint. But for me personally, I miss having 2 teams with distinct uniforms. Why? Because it makes enemies and teammates significantly easier to differentiate from one another. Even if by chance you have an entire team consisting of one singular operator, they all have many different skins that make it visually confusing to look at, which can cost you precious reaction time. Again, minor complaint. I know many players appreciate having more unique looking operators with various skins, and while it works for a battle royale game, for team-based multiplayer games where you do not have clearly defined roles like Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, it feels like a feature that just simply doesn't need to exist. The audio engine in Modern Warfare has been a large topic since the first beta of the game, and it continues to be so now, even more than 2 years on. Footsteps are often excessively loud, resulting in hearing your opponent well and truly before you see them, allowing players to aim down the side of the corner and get the drop on them. At the same time, vehicles, kill streaks and explosions drown out all other sound effects, to the point a player might be firing an LMG next to you, but you can't hear him over the VTOL on the other side of the map. Footsteps are usually lost in the explosions and general noise of the match, which I realise might sound a little hypocritical of me since I just talked about footsteps being too loud. But there's a fine line to walk with having inaudible footsteps and your soldier having cinder blocks tied to their feet. As well as vertical audio often being muffled and indistinguishable from above and below, making it much more difficult to tell player locations. The HUD in a first-person shooter is one of the most important elements of informing you about what's happening around you. It's responsible for telling you your health, remaining ammunition, score, equipment, and so on. So what's the issue here? Why am I bringing this up? Well, the problem lies with your team and objective markers. Objective markers scale in size, with them becoming larger the further away you are from the objective, which on various maps blocks a central line of sights and can completely obscure your vision at times. You can aim down sight to completely remove the icon on your screen, but this sacrifices movement and it still doesn't change the issue at hand. As for your team, the icons persist through walls, there's no option to abbreviate player names, and at times it can be extremely difficult to differentiate between an ally and an enemy with how the nameplates stack up. Personally, I'd like to see more options for player name abbreviations, smaller text, and less contrasting font color. Somehow in 2009, Modern Warfare 2 managed to get this right. The last thing to bring up, of course, is the visual fidelity in-game. No, I don't mean how many polygons character models use, the texture resolutions, or the shader quality. What I'm talking about is this. Yes, the abundance of dust, smoke, and clouding that obscures visibility, as well as lighting that, yes, acts realistic, but in a game where fast-paced movement is encouraged, having a player go from a brightly lit environment into a building with even an ounce of shade will put them at a massive disadvantage while the player view adjusts, much like your retinas do in real life. These precious moments can absolutely cost you your life and make pushing into buildings even more risky than it already is, which causes hesitation on the player's behalf and can stagnate the gameplay. This also causes frustration on already dark maps like Piccadilly, where players already blend into their surroundings. If you add a visible cloud of dust on top of that, well, it becomes just that more frustrating to die to, as well as the fact that there's an overall murky haze on top of the game. I know, realism, so a focus on brown, greys and black, especially in industrial and desert landscapes, but a massive lack of colour unfortunately makes it feel quite dull, and when it comes to fighting at range, makes distinguishing players from the background rather difficult. So, what can we sum up from this? The overall gameplay is attempting to merge slower tactical gameplay from a very different style of game with the fast-paced gameplay of the Call of Duty, namely Black Ops, franchise, leading to various fundamental gameplay clashes at odds with one another. Combined with a fast time to kill, low recoil on fully equipped weapons, and mechanics like mounting, leads to gameplay that tends to favour holding a position on the map rather than moving around. Most maps suffer from flaws like narrow choke points, lack of flanking routes, and ironically are often too large for the number of players in the lobby. Gunsmith? Yes. Changing the minimap to not show player locations when firing unsuppressed weapons results in players being unable to figure out other player locations and slows gameplay down. Not standardizing the appearance of teams makes differentiating players difficult from one team to the next. Realistic lighting makes players pushing into or out of buildings when sunlight is involved much more disadvantaged than someone who stays stationary and even. Audio that is inconsistent, with footsteps being too loud or non-existent, and vehicles and explosions drowning out all other types of audio. And lastly, dust clouds and excessive smoke or fog inhibits visibility on top of an already murky looking game. While I can't say for certain if adjusting all these issues would result in a perfect game, I do believe it would alleviate many players' frustrations and see the game in a new light, especially the time to kill issue. For me, Modern Warfare 2019 was a flawed but very enjoyable experience, featuring excellent gunplay, in-depth and endless gun customization, with very little in the way of gimmicks like Black Ops 4 and Advanced Warfare that ruined the gameplay flow. And just to really play devil's advocate here, while Modern Warfare is regarded as the camper's paradise, I think people are forgetting that that is an issue that has been throughout FPS games and other Call of Duty games for many years. For example, everyone praises Black Ops 2 as being one of the best Call of Duty games of all time, but they also happen to forget about how many players sat in rooms like the upstairs of nuke townhouses with guardians, shock grenades and bouncing betties. I bet you forgot about that one, didn't you? Anyway guys, maybe I've helped you see the game you disliked in a new light, or one that you enjoyed without realizing the flaws it had. If so, I'd appreciate if you left a like on the video. Or who knows, maybe I missed something that you find killed your enjoyment of the game. Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you then.